Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Wow, thank you all for coming out in this incredibly hot weather and being with us today. My name is Erin Kelly, and I am the Program Director for Spirit and Place. Welcome to Civic Saturday. For how many of you, is this your first Civic Saturday? Awesome, wonderful. I'm so happy to see you here. Thank you so much. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Spirit and Place, we are a legacy project of the Polis Center. We're housed in the IU School of Liberal Arts at IUPUI. And as an organization, we believe in the power of the arts, humanities, and religion to bring people together. I want to begin today by thanking our Civic Saturday host, Central Library. I want to thank our coffee partner, the League of Women Voters of Indianapolis. You can also all thank my mom for the cookies. I need to thank KI New Media for filming today and for Indiana Humanities for giving us the grant that allows us to have this event filmed today. For anyone who is new to Civic Saturday, this is a time of fellowship. It's a time of gathering and a time to reflect on and wrestle with our civic values. It's a chance for us not to gather so much around parties and politics, but around ideas, beliefs, and values. Values that are central to what it means to be an American living in a democracy. And not just living in a democracy, but actively working to make sure that democracy works for everyone. Now, this concept emerged in Seattle in 2016 under the banner of Citizen University, and it is an idea that is spreading. I'm happy to say that there's another woman here in Indianapolis, Abby Dennis, somewhere back over here, who recently went to Seattle and trained on how to conduct these Civic Saturday events as well. And Abby is hosting her first Civic Saturday on August 17th. It's independently operated. It's not under Spirit Place's banner, but I hope you'll check it out. And you can learn more at Civic Saturday at Fletcher Place. Just go on Facebook and put that in, Civic Saturday at Fletcher Place. And I believe Abby also has some information, so you're welcome to connect with her later. Now, as with all Civic Saturdays, we're going to listen to some poetry, sing a couple songs, reflect on some civic readings, hear a civic sermon, and participate in small group conversations called civic circles. Now again, for any of the new folks, that outline and everything might sound a little church-like, I get it. But Civic Saturdays does not aim to co-opt or replace any faith tradition. And in fact, at Spirit and Place, we're big believers that one's faith tradition, whatever it may or may not be, plays an important role in civic life by providing guidance on how we live with one another. Now, we also feel that the arts and humanities help provide this guidance as well, and that in a democracy, we need all the tools we can get our hands on to help us make it through this world together. So Civic Saturdays are an acknowledgement that we humans need and crave time together in community. And in a democracy like ours, we need to intentionally set aside time to cultivate a shared sense of civic purpose. We need to acknowledge that it takes hard work to define our civic characters. And only by doing this hard work and doing it intentionally, which oftentimes means grappling with the hard stuff and sometimes disagreeing with one another, can we gain clarity to live by the civic values we say we believe in. Now, before we start doing all of that, I'm going to ask everybody to kind of center yourselves. So rule number one in Civic Saturdays, you got to turn off those phones, put them under your chair. I want you to give yourself the gift of the next hour of just being present with one another. While I love your social media love, #SPIndy, all of that can wait. All of that can wait until after the Civic Saturday. So after you put those phones away, I would like for you to just put your feet on the ground. And then just hold your hands comfortably in your lap, whatever works for you. And I'd like everybody to close your eyes. And I just want you to take 3 breaths in, or count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And then let it out for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then just whatever rhythm works for you, just take a couple more deep breaths in, a longer breath out. One more time. And out. And then shake out whatever remaining tension you might have sitting there in your body. All right, so now we're all here. We're in the moment together. So we're going to start things off with song, and I'd like to welcome Adam Blevins with Song Squad to up front, and he's going to lead us in our first song. Adam, take it away.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Adam Blevins. I co-lead a group called Song Squad with my sister Pam Hinkle. We are a non-judgmental, all-inclusive singing group. Our motto is paperless singing in a perfection-free zone. So that means if you don't think you can sing, I am not terribly interested. I know you can, right? So I'm going to teach you a song. I'm going to sing a line to you twice, right? And then you sing it back to me. Could we all please stand up? Before you sit down, I'd like you to look at your neighbor and say, "You sound wonderful."
I'm very pleased and happy to welcome Felipe Martinez to the podium. He is going to read our poem for us today.
You, If No One Else, by Tino Villanueva. Listen, you who transformed your anguish into healthy awareness, put your voice where your memory is. You who swallowed the afternoon dust, defend everything you understand with words. You, if no one else, will condemn with your tongue the erosion which each disappointment brings. You who saw the images of disgust growing will understand how time devours the destitute. You who gave yourself your own commandments know better than anyone why you turned your back on your town's toughest limits. Don't hush. Don't throw away the most persistent truth, as our hard-headed brethren sometimes do. Remember well what your life was like. Cloudiness and slick mud after a drizzle. Flimsy windows, the wind keeps rattling in winter. And that unheated slab dwelling where coldness crawled up in your clothes. Tell how you were able to come to this point, to unbar history's doors, to see your early years, your people, the others. Name the way rebellion's calm spirit has served you, and how you came to unlearn the lessons of that teacher, your land's omnipotent defiler.
Wow, that was powerful. Thank you. I'm Beth Outland, and I am on the steering committee for Spirit in Place, and I'm really happy to be gathered with all of you here today. For the next few minutes, we're going to give you time to connect with each other. So we'd like you to turn to your neighbor or someone nearby that you don't already know, and we'd like you to reflect on what you, if no one else, would like to see happen in America today. And we're going to give you around 5 or 6 minutes.
Great, thank you. Okay, that was exciting to hear that much chatter amongst everybody. Thank you so much for getting into that. I hope you had a good conversation there, and I hope you actually talked to somebody that you don't know. That would be even a better thing. Civic Saturdays always include readings that we share in common, and I have 3 volunteers today who have volunteered to read our readings that you can find in your program. So I'm going to ask those volunteers to go ahead and come on up to the podium.
Hello, everyone. My name is Destiny, and I've been invited to share one of the readings today. You can find all these readings in your program, and I will be reading part of Frederick Douglass's speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July, given on July 5th, 1852. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost.
My name is Abby Dennis. I'm reading from Susan B. Anthony's speech, Is It a Crime for a U.S. Citizen to Vote?, given in 1873. It was we the people, not we white male citizens, nor yet we male citizens, but we the whole people who formed this union, and we formed it not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. And it is downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by this democratic Republican government.
Hi, I'm Loretta Good, and I am reading a portion of a speech given on Cesar Chavez's behalf in 1968 after he ended a 25-day-long fast in support of farm workers' rights. When we are really honest with ourselves, we must admit that our lives are all that really belong to us. So it is how we use our life that determines what kind of people we really are.
I want to thank all of our readers. I've said this before, but when you come to Civic Saturday, there's always a chance you might get that tap on your shoulder from me asking you to do some public speaking, so I always appreciate it when people say yes, especially the new folks. All right, well, welcome again. Almost a year ago to this day, I stood in this room and in this very spot, and I talked about promises, about how America is an experiment, and how its many, many promises have yet to be fulfilled. I talked about how as citizens, and not citizens defined by legal status or paperwork, but by the shared action of showing up for one another in public life, how as citizens we are obligated to help America live up to her many promises. Now, I gave that sermon a year ago because of what was in the news. America had just begun separating families along the border, and we were learning about the warehousing of children in abandoned Walmarts. It's hard to imagine how things can go from bad to worse, but they have. Our government actually debated in federal court last month whether children under our care deserve toothpaste and soap. And last week, our country launched massive deportation efforts of undocumented immigrants, attempted to change asylum rules, and told 4 members of Congress, all women of color, to go home. In each instance, children undoubtedly were harmed by what they experienced or heard. And how anyone can look at a scared child and think they deserve anything less than warm hugs, smiles, encouragement, and only the security that a loved one or parent can provide is absolutely beyond me. And when it's my country that can't see this, it breaks my heart. It is despairing in the deepest sense, and it makes me feel weak and insignificant in the face of inhumanity I can't comprehend. So when I think back to that sermon, and when I think back to how I concluded that sermon, I talked about the need for each of us to embrace and remember the darker moments of our history, because while the past shapes our present, it need not define our future. And I talked about how we need to love one another so that we do not lose the sight of the humanity in others and our own humanity. And I still believe all of that. I believe in the power of history, I believe in the power of love, but folks, I also believe we need a little rebellion. We are a nation that was shaped and founded by rebellion after all. But rebellion, a constructive kind, not a destructive kind, it takes a lot of energy. And I know it can be hard to tap into that energy when times are bleak. And that's why I want all of us here today to commit to one particular act of rebellion, and that is to be optimistic. As the futurist Alex Steffen says, cynicism is often seen as a rebellious attitude. But in reality, our cynicism advances the desires of the powerful. Cynicism is obedience. Optimism is a political act. Now, I admit to not feeling a great deal of optimism in our elected officials and our political systems right now, and it is hard to feel optimistic when I know children are suffering. But I refuse to give up hope. I refuse to let go of the belief that good citizens, you, if no one else, will fight for those children and will fight for the soul of our democracy. Because giving up and claiming it's all hopeless, embracing an attitude of cynicism, folks, that is the goal of these cruel practices. Because there are those who want us to be complacent. They want us to be obedient. And sadly, using children to crush optimism and to breed cynicism, that is one of those hard historical truths we have to deal with. It isn't new. This country turned away Jewish refugees, many of them children, fleeing Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It stole African American children off of reservations and sent them to re-education white boarding schools throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. It lied to Mexican American citizens during the Great Depression by telling them there were jobs in Mexico, putting them on trains and effectively deporting and separating tens of thousands of families. And it has stalked and devastated black families 150 years after emancipation with Jim Crow laws, segregation, redlining, and mass incarceration. But we cannot let the weight of that knowledge paralyze us. We must stake out rebelliously optimistic roles for ourselves because that is the courageous act needed if we are to help America live up to her promises and principles. You, if no one else. And this goes for you regardless of color, age, gender, ethnicity, background, political persuasion. You must find the courage to cling to your optimism. As Alex Steffen also notes, we cannot build what we cannot imagine. And you are going to need optimism to imagine something better than what is. So my goal today is to try to provide a little inspiration on that front. So I'm going to briefly talk about 3 rebels who dared to imagine a more perfect union. 3 rebels whose optimism made this nation better. Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, and Cesar Chavez. Now, none of these people lived perfect lives. They were not heroes in all of their deeds and words, but they had heroic moments that we are all the better for. I'll begin with Frederick Douglass. Our nation just wrapped up its 243rd birthday, and we celebrate the 4th of July because it marks the beginning of a new nation, a nation founded on the ideals of liberty, equality, freedom, happiness, and yes, rebellion. We're a nation that emerged out of an act of rebellion. From the Boston Tea Party, you know, that costume party that had looting as its main theme. From the Boston Tea Party to the actual Revolutionary War, this nation was founded by rebels. Now, of course, that rebellious and freedom-loving spirit did not include everyone. As Samuel Johnson, a British writer, essayist, and moralist wrote in 1775, how is it that we hear the loudest yelps for liberty amongst the drivers of Negroes? Fair question, Dr. Johnson. Now, this hypocrisy is why the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, when asked by the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society to deliver a keynote address to their Independence Day celebration in 1852, 9 years before the Civil War, he declined to speak until July 5th. The 4th of July is yours, not mine, he says. You may rejoice, but I must mourn. What to the American slave is the 4th of July? I answer a day that reveals to him, more than any other day in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. He was just getting warmed up. Now here's the context, though, in which he's giving these remarks. We know from the 1850 census there were more than 3.2 million enslaved people in the country at this time. 2 years prior to this speech, the Fugitive Slave Act had just been passed. Now this is a federal law that required everyone to honor the property rights of those who enslaved Black Americans. It made it illegal to assist. That is to give food, water, or shelter to those running towards freedom. Does any of that sound familiar? This was the world Frederick Douglass, a man who had escaped slavery himself, lived in. His speech that day was harsh. Truth often is. But it was also optimistic. He believed the abolition of slavery would ultimately happen. He believed good people and even America's institutions would make it so. He tells his audience the Declaration of Independence contains saving principles, and that we should stand by those principles at whatever cost. He even concludes by saying, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope. while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered. Now, when I read this speech, what I hear Douglas say to these folks, largely a group of white women, so I acknowledge it resonates with me from that perspective, but what I hear him saying to this group is, hey, I get up every day in a world that is a lot harder for me to walk in than it is for you. And I acknowledge you've got your challenges, but I need you to remain committed to those founding documents and principles you say you love so much on your Independence Day. I need you to fight the cynicism. I need you to remain rebelliously optimistic with me that our efforts are going to amount to something, because giving up isn't an option for me. And if I can remain optimistic in the progress of humanity and in a nation that literally thinks I am less than human, what the hell's your excuse? Now, I'm like anyone else. Sometimes I need a good kick in the pants kind of message in order to keep me motivated, and that's what Douglas provides in this speech. How dare I not put the work forward to remain optimistic that my country and my fellow citizens can correct things when Frederick Douglass, a man who faced challenges I will never be able to comprehend, maintained such courage and optimism himself. Now, another rebel who inspires me is Susan B. Anthony. Like Douglas, Anthony did not believe failure to be an option. In fact, on her 86th birthday in 1906, she famously quipped, "Failure is impossible." Anthony died a month after making that remark. She died 14 years before the passage of the 19th Amendment. And the 19th Amendment is the one that prohibits the government from denying the right to vote based on sex. Anthony began her work as an activist at the age of 17 by collecting signatures for an anti-slavery petition. In her early 30s, she met her dear lifelong friend, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and together they founded many organizations, the first of which was the Women's Loyal National League, which was this country's first political organization run by women, and they led a campaign to amend the Constitution to abolish slavery. How many of you remember Barack Obama's "Yes We Can" slogan? Well, that came from the UFW slogan, "Si Puebla." Chavez once said, "From the depth of need and despair, people can work together, can organize themselves to serve their own problems, and fill their own needs with dignity and strength." What he's talking about there is the unstoppable power of citizens who believe it matters when we show up for each other. Citizens who, even during times of hopelessness, never give up hope, and who fight to see America live up to her principles, whatever the cost. Now, that's a lot to ask for, I know. It's a lot to me to ask of myself, let alone you. But it is the kind of rebellious action and optimism that has historically moved America forward. And I think it's also important for all of us here to remember that this optimism, it wasn't just held in the hearts of Douglas, Anthony, and Chavez. It was an optimism held in the hearts of everyday people who worked alongside them, the you and me of those eras, those who also didn't give up. Those who fought off cynicism, remained optimistic, and showed up for each other when it mattered most. Now, I find comfort in stories of the past. I'm a historian by training. They help center my civic commitment, and they help recharge my optimism. But if looking at the past doesn't really do it for you, that's fine. Look at today. Look at the Wayfair employees who conducted a walkout to bring attention to that company's profiting off of a furniture contract with ICE. Or the Jewish activists with Never Again Action who are protesting and getting arrested outside ICE facilities as we speak. There was just a group of priests and nuns who were in the Senate building on Thursday who formed a human cross. They were also arrested. Look at the jurors in the case against Scott Warren, a 36-year-old geography teacher who assisted 2 hungry and dehydrated migrants in the middle of the desert last summer. The jury couldn't decide if what they did was a crime, so he walks as a free man today. These are all examples of the mightiness of citizen power. Now, whatever you need to do to stay tapped into the belief that that power is real and that you can use it, whatever you need to stay tapped into your optimism, find it. Maybe it's a song, maybe it's a poem, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a friend that you turn to. Find something. So I have to confess, that something for me lately has been an essay that was written by Guillermo del Toro. It came out in Time magazine this past February. And it is an essay that I have been turning back to repeatedly since February because it helps recharge my civic spirit. And I told you my goal today was to help inspire you, to help maybe recharge your civic energies a little bit as well. So we're going to do something a little different with this Civic Saturday. It's not only the 3 volunteers who were called up here earlier who are going to read together. We're all going to read together. So I'd like for you to stand up if you're able and comfortable too. So let's all get started. Optimism is radical.
It is the hard choice, the brave choice.
And it is most needed now in the face of despair, just as a car is most needed where there is a distance to close.
Otherwise, it is a large, unmovable object parked in the garage.
These days, the safest way to appear intelligent is to be skeptical by default.
We seem sophisticated when we say we don't believe, and disingenuous when we say we do.
History and fable show nothing is ever higher than us.
David can take Goliath.
Oh, read that one again.
David can take Goliath.
There you go.
A beach in Normandy can turn the tide.
Bravery can topple the powerful.
These facts are often seen as exceptional, but they are not. Every day, we all become the balance of our choices.
Choices between love and fear, belief and despair.
No
hope is ever too small.
Optimism is our instinct to inhale while suffocating.
Our need to declare what needs to be in the face of what is.
Optimism is not uncool.
It is rebellious and daring and vital.